Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual. Hi. Welcome to the virtual Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. A few things to start out for the good of the order. Everyone from the public entering the hearing has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you'll be called upon and unmuted. We will ask if you have any slides to share or if you can use the planner slides for your visuals. If you have your own slides, your role will change to panelist. This may log you off for a moment and log you back in, and then you'll have the capabilities to share your screen. Quick overview for Zoom, as it's different for each type of device you might be using. If you're on a smartphone, you'll be limited to only speaking and sharing on your sharing your camera. If you're on a computer, you can share your webcam if you have one, or your screen when called upon. Some laptops might not have microphone capabilities. If you wish to speak over the phone but watch on your computer, the phone number for the hearing listed on the email is on the email that you received when you registered for tonight's hearing. And I'll also put it in the chat for tonight's hearing as well. For both smartphone and computer participation, there are controls on the bottom of Zoom to virtually raise your hand when you speak on the item you're interested in. If you're interested in and you're attending on the phone, you can virtually raise your hand by typing in *9. Again, that's *9 when you're wanting to raise your hand virtually over the phone. There is a chat function in Zoom. It's not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team. Then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the registered neighborhood association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony with those who signed up on the electronic sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand virtually. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Then the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances, and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan amendments. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it is important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you all for virtually attending tonight. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Stead. Schaefer.
Here.
Squires.
Here.
Blanchard.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Stevens. Gillespie.
Here.
Benfrock.
Here.
Bratnober.
Here.
2 absent. Seven present.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move right along into building our consent agenda. We have several items eligible this evening for the consent agenda. First, without objection, I'd like to place the minutes from our meeting on June 1st and the meeting on June 8th on the consent agenda. Then moving on into new business, we have several time extensions. I think we'll tackle those first. So item A is CUP 18-64 at 2350 West Kootenai Street. It's a 1-year time extension. That is not a public hearing. So without objection, we'll place item A on the consent agenda. Item B is PUD 18-17 and CVA 18-36, HIP 5 LLC at 1702 West Rossi Street. That is also a one-year time extension and not a public hearing item. So without objection, we'll place item B on the consent agenda. Next up, we have item D, which is SUB 20-11. That's Joyful Subdivision at 2311 Curtis Road. This is a preliminary and final plat for residential subdivision comprised of 1 common and 13 buildable lots on 4.3 acres in an R2D zone. That is also not a public hearing item. So without objection, we'll place item D on the consent agenda. And then moving on to item number 3, that is CVA 20-23 Stoddard Property Investments. That is at 12323 West Franklin Road. That's a variance to encroach in the rear parking setback abutting residential to construct additional service area drive. Is the applicant here this evening for that item? If so, I see a hand up for Cornell Larson. And is the applicant in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? You're muted.
Yes, we are in agreement.
Terrific, thank you. The records show the applicant is in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report. And is there anyone in the audience this evening that wishes to testify in opposition to this item? I see no hands up. And for those in attendance online, we have no one in, oh, excuse me, we have one individual in person here this evening at City Hall. So with that, item number 3, as we have no one in opposition in attendance, we will place item number 3 on the consent agenda. And with that, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
I have a procedural question with respect to item C.
Okay.
So it's not a public hearing. And so members of the public and any people who want to respond to this matter would view it not as a public hearing. And yet we have a request for the Barber Valley Neighborhood Association to speak on the record. I'm just confused. Is this the proper venue for them to speak on the record about this particular application since it's not a public hearing? I'm just wondering why we're doing that. And I guess I would refer that either to the chair, to city staff, to Celine, or to James, our lawyer.
Well, we have late correspondence that came in, I believe on Friday of last week, and I will defer to staff for a little bit of input on this matter.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, it is not a public hearing item in the sense that we do not notice subdivisions. So, but it still does require a public hearing decision by the commission, certainly at your discretion to take in testimony. I believe Barber Valley has comments just on the overall neighborhood. And certainly when subdivisions go to city council, they still hear it like a public hearing item as well. So it is at your discretion how you'd like to proceed tonight. Usually we don't have these happen often, but usually we do treat them just like a normal public hearing item with applicant or staff, applicant, and then any neighborhood feedback.
Thank you.
And our applicant is present this evening, correct? I apologize. Okay. I appreciate
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as you outlined, consisting of minutes 1, 2, new business items A, B, D, and number 3.
Second.
Perfect. I have a motion from Commissioner Gillespie and a second from Commissioner Finfrock. Any additional conversation on the matter, discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the vote?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Squires,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Yes.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Very good. Thank you. We also have a few items that are requesting deferral to later dates. We'll go ahead and handle those individually right now. The first of those is item number 1, that is CPA 20-1, Boise City Planning and Development Services. This is a request for deferral to August 10th of this year. That's a comprehensive plan amendment for minor updates, including text and map amendments in order to adopt new plans by reference and retire outdated plans. Again, that is a deferral. Is there anyone in the audience this evening that was here to testify on that item? Seeing no hands raised and no one in person, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock.
I move to defer item number 1 to August 10th, 2020.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Finfrock and a second by Commissioner Bratnober. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the vote?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. Let's move right along to item number 6. That is also another deferral request. That is CAR 19-21, Boise State University. This is a request for deferral to the August 3rd meeting. It's a rezone of 4 parcels totaling 0.83 acres from an R2 zone to a university zone. Is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to testify on this item that cannot attend the August 3rd meeting? Seeing no hands raised, do I have a motion to defer this item?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Finfrock.
I move to defer item number 6 to August 3rd, 2020.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Finfrock and a second from Commissioner Bratnober. Any additional discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the vote?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie, All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. Looks like, I think that takes care of our upfront items. We'll move right on in now with our outstanding new business. First item is item C, that's SUB 20-20 Wise Way subdivision at 2940 South PERRAULT Way. And I believe Ms. Womack is here to present that for us.
Thank you. Just a second and I'll share my screen. Madam Chair, Commissioners, the next item on tonight's agenda is a request for a preliminary and final plat on 1.51 acres in an SBO1 zone. The residential subdivision is comprised of 4 buildable lots for future multifamily residential developments and live-work units. The proposed lots comply with the dimensional standards of the SBO1 zone and the Harris Ranch specific plan. Harris Ranch specific plan designates the site as mixed-use commercial and medium high-density residential. The proposed street layout matches the circulation plan for the area. All of the buildings will be required to comply with the dimensional standards of the SPO1 zone and will require design review approval prior to receiving building permits. The lot layout will comply with these block prototypes, which show several configuration possibilities, including attached townhomes, condominiums, apartments near the sidewalk, creating a vibrant streetscape. PERRAULT Way is currently partially improved with 2 lanes, curb, gutter, and no sidewalk. The applicant proposes to extend PERRAULT Way to Wise Way and complete the road as a 39-foot wide street section with on-street parking, curb, gutter, planter strip, and detached concrete sidewalk abutting the site. Wise Way abutting the site will be improved as 1/2 of a 39-foot wide street section with a travel lane, on-street parking, curb, gutter, planter strip, and detached sidewalk. This is in compliance with the circulation plan of the Harris Ranch specific plan. A future roundabout at Wise Way's intersection with Warm Springs Ave will be constructed once traffic counts warrant construction. Eventually, and if warranted, the specific plan has Warm Springs Ave planned as a 5-lane arterial roadway with 2-lane wide roundabouts at each intersection. However, it was determined that no improvements to Warm Springs Ave or its intersections would be needed at this time. As noted in the previous plat, the city is starting discussions with ACHD about the process in which to keep Warm Springs at 2 lanes. Currently, the closest north-south pedestrian connection across Warm Springs is the rapid flashing beacon at the entrance to Marion William Park, 341 feet to the south of the site. Comments from BB&A are included in leaked correspondence, and they are here tonight. In summary, BB&A supports the plat, but believes Wise Way should include bike lanes. The Harris Ranch specific plan is an approved plan that provides both the neighborhood and developer assurances of what is planned and approved to be built in the area. The plan was recently amended in 2019, and while the neighbors' concerns are valid, they aren't specific to this subdivision application, but rather the entire Harris Ranch area. These concerns would have been best addressed under the context of last year's specific plan amendment, and at this time, only a prelim and final plat is before the Planning and Zoning Commission in order to create the proposed lots and continue to extend right-of-way. Changes can still occur within the local roadways after build-out to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles. This should not delay the platting process. As conditioned, the planning team recommends approval of the application with conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nicolette. We'll go ahead and hear from the applicant now.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street with the law firm of Clark Wardle representing the applicant. I'll note that Doug Fowler and Dave Powell are also online. And so if there are questions that either of them are better at answering, I'll defer to them. I have prepared a slide deck but I think in the interest of time, what I would like to just emphasize is just a couple of things. First of all, that as Nicolette mentioned, this does comply with SPO1. It complies with all of the applicable block prototypes. And because it's squarely within the boundaries of SPO1, this is a fairly straightforward matter. We have appreciated the opportunity to work with and continue discussions with Barber Valley Neighborhood Association over the past several months. And so we anticipate that continuing. But in the meantime, we are in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report and would ask for your approval. And in the meantime, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. We'll move ahead to the Barber Valley Neighborhood Association before we take questions. I assume there's a representative online of the Neighborhood Association. Okay, yes, Mr. Mooney.
Mr. Chair, John Mooney, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
John Mooney, 7153 East Highland Valley Road, on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. As Heath said, and as Nicolette also said, we're in full agreement, and this is another very attractive development for our neighborhood that we're excited about, not in opposition to. But we do want to kind of make the point again it's related to your item number 1 tonight, the comp plan amendment, which we've been trading notes with Kathleen Lacey, who's handling that, which is specific plans are tough for neighbors. They provide great predictability for both the developer and new neighbors. But one of the challenges is they're very complex. And for example, as Nicolette noted in her project report, and both Heath and Mr. Fowler would agree on, you really have to understand the plan pretty well, or as a member of the public, you're really going to get behind. We missed the opportunity to voice some of our concerns regarding connectivity and active transportation and Warm Springs Avenue, and in this case, bike lanes on Wiseway. We missed that opportunity back in the fall of, in 2018, basically, and 2019, when the specific plan was up for amendment. And Lanier and the developer was very gracious and brought us into that discussion. But frankly, we didn't know enough and look hard enough to understand the complexity of the plan and where we might have been able to nudge things in maybe a different direction that the neighborhood would be a little bit more supportive of. It's a great plan. It could have been just a notch better. And so that's water under the bridge, and we recognize that. My last comment would be, so we're going to work with the city on the comp plan discussion and offer our perspective on SPO3, because it seems to be very rudimentary right now, not nearly to the standards of SPO1 especially. And we really think the neighbors that are going to live in SPO3 are going to be maybe a little bit frustrated with the plans that are in ordinance that are really tough for you as commissioners to take any action on, because it's already zoned that way. Not a whole lot of flexibility. So changes to make things maybe notch them a little bit better are tough to do. Last point, which is just a credibility point with ACHD. I know I'm speaking to the choir, but that was really frustrating for us to notice that that a staff report that was read by the commissioners and approved by the ACHD staff had a glaring mistake regarding transit in the Harris Ranch area. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
I move we approve SBU 20-20 with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, very good. I have a motion by Commissioner Gillespie and a second from Commissioner Finfrock. Any discussion from the commission? Okay. Seeing no waving of hands, we're going to go ahead and call the vote, please.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, we're clipping right along. We'll go up to item number 2. That is ZOA 19-4, Boise City Planning and Development Services. We have an amendment to Boise City Code Chapter 11-7-3.5. And I believe Mr. Pete Meyer is here for that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Mr. Chair, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're a little quiet. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to speak a little bit louder here. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This item is in regards to proposed zoning code changes for accessible parking found under Boise City Code Chapter 110703.5. Back in March of 2019, the city's Accessible Parking Committee initiated the discussion to modify city code relative to design requirements for accessible parking on private lots. From that discussion, the committee made three specific recommendations to the city of Boise, which are listed here. The first one is to add language requiring that the placement of van accessible parking stalls be to the left-hand side of the access aisle. Second would be to place both signage at the head of the access aisle and pavement markings within the access aisle to indicate that it is in fact not a parking stall and therefore parking is prohibited. And the third item is to correct an error in the ratio for van accessible to standard accessible parking stalls under subsection C3. Specifically, that third item references text where the current ratio is listed as 1 to 8 accessible spaces. However, the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design and our code under 110705.A correctly identifies the ratio as 1 to 6. These three modifications will promote best practices for the design of van accessible parking relative to that access aisle. It will promote compliance with the no parking zones at accessible parking stalls, and it will provide for the correct ratio of van accessible to standard accessible stalls within on-site parking facilities. By providing the appropriate number of van accessible spaces and improving the design criteria for those stalls, as well as providing clear signage and pavement markings, the city of Boise will promote adequate facilities for those living with disabilities. These modifications will allow all individuals to have safe and efficient access to parking and buildings and will make a significant improvement in the comfort, safety, and comfort for both residents and visitors. In terms of Blueprint Boise, the proposed modifications comply with Blueprint Boise and a number of policies integrating transportation and land use, specifically those policies reflected in a connected community, being a safe and healthy and caring community, and community structure and design. With that, Planning and Development Services recommends that the Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission submit a recommendation of approval to the Boise City Council in regard to the modifications to Chapter 110703.5 that are noted within the staff report. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. And since the applicant is the city and it's a citywide code change, there's no neighborhood association. So I think we'll move right along into questions from the commission for the applicant.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Bratnober.
Yes, I have just one question. Am I correct in assuming that all current parking lots are grandfathered in under the old rules subsequent to the adoption of this?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I might defer to the current planning staff that's on hand, but I believe that is correct.
Okay, maybe it's Andrea, Ms. Tuning. Nope.
There we go. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Andrea Tuning, Comprehensive Planner for Planning and Development Services. That would be correct. Any existing parking lot would be grandfathered in the event that they were to ever change the use or redefine the parking lot. At that time, they would be required to come up to the current code, which would require the accessible parking stall design and signage and pavement marking at that time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Blanchard?
Oh, thank you. Can someone on city staff speak to the public contribution on this issue? What groups we worked with, or is this just a technical correction in your estimation?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, so the recommendation actually originated from the city's citizen accessible parking committee made up of 7 members of the public who are familiar with this topic, and that is where the idea was generated. There's been no specific public outreach for this item or the proposed changes therein.
Thank you, Zach.
Any other questions for staff from the commission? Okay, thanks everybody. We'll go ahead and open this up to the public then. We have a couple of folks that signed up. We'll start with people that signed up here, and then we'll move to other folks that may be in attendance that want to testify. The first name I have is Jeremy Maxand.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, can you hear me okay?
We can, yes. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jeremy Maxand. I live at 5861 East Playwright Street in Boise, Idaho, 83716. I appreciate the opportunity to briefly comment on this code change. I'm a member of the City of Boise ADA Parking Committee, and I'm a person who uses a wheelchair and uses accessible parking. The genesis of this code change was really the need to create more communication with the public that access aisles are not places to park. You'd be surprised how many times you run into a grocery store and come back out and have to wait 5-10 minutes, maybe an hour for someone who has parked in those access aisles, and kind of leaving you to wait, to go about your business, which can be frustrating. The location of the access aisle, just to provide a little more clarification, is so that you, if you have a van, drive a van, you can pull straight into a parking stall and then have immediate access to that access aisle on the right-hand side of your vehicle. Backing into those stalls can be challenging for some and create safety issues and whatnot. So that's the reason we were recommending that, and appreciate the update to the code to recognize the number of stalls required under the law. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maxand. Appreciate your input. Next on the list, we have Ken Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Ken Jones. I reside at 1159 E Kimberly Lane in Boise. I'm chair of the Accessible Parking Committee, and I think Jeremy has done an outstanding job of making the committee's presentation along with Zach. We just ask for your approval. It gives our disabled community much better access and mobility. And we've got some other issues, but the committee is dealing with those. And thank you very much. And are there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. That is all the folks that signed up ahead of time for this meeting. Is there anyone else in attendance this evening that would like to testify on behalf of this item? Okay, very good. The applicant does have an opportunity to rebut, but I don't think there's any need for that here this evening. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and return this back to the commission. Do I have a motion?
Chairman,
Commissioner Bratnober?
I move that we approve ZOA 19-4 based on the recommendations of the staff report.
Second.
A motion from Commissioner Bratnober, and I think a second from Commissioner Squires. Any discussion? Okay. Well, I'll just chime in real quick. I think that it's certainly a positive move to make this change to the code, make this recommendation to City Council. So we'll just kind of keep it short and sweet and leave it at that. Unless there's any other discussion, and if I'm missing someone, but I don't think I am, we'll go ahead and just call the vote.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Ratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thanks everybody. And now we'll move on. I believe our next item is number 4. That is CFH 20-35 and SUB 20-17 at 3773 North Cartwright Road. This is a hillside grading permit and preliminary plat for, I believe it's 4 buildable lots on 9.28 acres. And Mr. Moser is here this evening for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. No, it's shared. Stop sharing. Is it working? Give me a moment. Technical difficulties. All right, got that straightened out. Sorry for that. The applicant is requesting a Category 3 hillside review associated with 4-lot subdivision on approximately 9.28 acres. As you can see from the surrounding area, it is comprised of residential neighborhoods and open space to the north, east, and west. And at the intersection of Bogus Basin and Cartwright to the south, it's a church and a fire station. This slide shows the current zoning of the site, which is R1B, single-family residential, with a small section of the property to the south zoned A1. Therefore, since the current zoning is already R1, single-family residential, no rezone is requested with this, and it's just a subdivision and a Category 3 hillside review application before the commission. I would note that the density of this project is actually very low. It's 4 lots on over 9 acres of land, so it's 0.4 units per acre at the proposed density. The subject property, well, before I start, just a reference, the north arrow here is actually to the side of the page. It's just easier to configure the odd configuration of this, or fit the odd configuration of this lot on the slide. So the north arrow is not to the north or to the top of the page. The subject property was initially platted as Lot 3 of the Lononi Hills subdivision with the intent to be developed as a single-family house. The grading of Lot 3 which included the service drive and the building pad, was completed back in 2002. The grading created a relatively flat area on the top of the ridge. The applicant intends to grade this already existing flat area into 4 building pads, each on its own lot, and the lots will range in size from 1.2 to over 4 acres in size. And this is the proposed lot layout for the subdivision on the preliminary plat. The grading plan shows this grading plan shows the 4 buildable pads and the service drive, which is existing. Since the grading is relatively restricted, or is generally restricted to the previous graded area, the grading proposed is limited to the essential grading only, and the cut and fill is balanced throughout the site with the proposed project. The project grading was reviewed by the public works engineer, who stated that that if all the conditions are met, the project is in compliance with the Hillside Development Code. The planning team did receive several letters of concern from the neighbors regarding the grading, fire department comments, and site design. As mentioned, the project was reviewed by the public works engineer, and it was determined that the site conditions and geology can support the proposed project if all conditions are met. In addition, I will note that you will hear tonight testimony from the public about moving the building pads away from the edge of the slope from the west side. Please understand this is not what the applicant is proposing. And to my knowledge, any modification of what is proposed here has not been reviewed by the public works engineer. The public works engineer is here tonight to answer any technical questions that the commission might have regarding the project. As for site design, the neighbors' concerns focus on site access from Cartwright Road to the houses for pedestrian and cars, traffic, and school capacity. To address the traffic and school concerns, I would note that this is a fairly low density development. As such, there is traffic capacity on the adjacent roads to support the project, and the school district did submit comments and had no concerns. Cars and pedestrians access from the site along the service or will be limited to the service drive, which will be improved as per fire department comments. Topography is very steep though, and limits access from the houses to the road to the service drive only. However, widening the service drive to provide some sort of pedestrian walkway or pathway is not possible without putting in excessive or without requiring an excessive amount of grading, which is greatly discouraged by the development code and the hillside ordinance. In addition, the project will comply with all the requirements of the fire department as per the revised letters that the commission should have received in their late correspondence, which includes providing a 30-foot WUI setback from all the adjacent open space land. So in conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of the Category 3 hillside application and the subdivision. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. I believe the applicant is online. Yes, Jane, the floor is yours.
David, can you put the grading plan back up on the screen, please?
And Ms. Suggs, you can please start with your name and address for the record.
I will do that. Thank you very much. Good evening, commissioners, staff, and of course, all the virtual guests. I'm Jane Suggs with Jim State Planning, 9840 West Overland Road, Suite 120 in Boise. Dave gave you a pretty quick overview of the project, but I can only add a few things. One is the most important one. I'm going to start off by letting you know we agree with and accept all the conditions of approval for both the subdivision and the hillside applications. As David mentioned, the property was previously approved as a subdivision called Leone Hills. It was approved and platted back in about 1999, 2000. Around 2005 is when some of these improvements were made. The road was put in and some grading. And Dave, I don't know if you have the original existing conditions drawing, but it shows where those pads are kind of where the grading has already occurred or where there are gently sloping areas. Our request, let's see, about 3 years ago, the current owner, Mr. J.O., purchased the land from our old coach, Pete. Our request is to subdivide the lot of 9.3 acres into 4 single-family homes. They'll use the existing driveway, and also it very much respects the graded areas that are already there and the gently sloping areas for the new homes. You can tell by the topo that there are some, you can see the underlying grades, and that's where the more gentle slopes are. We will meet the fire department requirements, we will meet the subdivision requirements, and we will meet the hillside requirements. As David noted, there were some concerns by the neighbors who live in a hillside development that's just across Cartwright Road and the El Pilar subdivision. We believe that we can address all of those concerns. Of course, the driveway will be widened to 20 feet. That allows for two-way traffic for 4 homes and also provide for fire access. And one of the things you might not notice, but we're actually putting a fire hydrant up on top of the hill. And that's to make sure that if there are fires to be fought, that up in that area where the turnaround is, little turnaround is, that you'll actually see that we don't have to pull a fire hose across Cartwright Road. There was some concern about views. Of course, those of you that I've worked with before know that there aren't any view easements. And actually most of the views we understand in El Pilar are kind of to the south, because if you're up high enough, you can see down the Cartwright area across and even to downtown Boise and beyond. Certainly Cartwright Road has the capacity to carry the traffic from 4 homes. And the application and materials and the agency comments have all addressed other issues that came up from the neighbors: soil stability, fire access, and stormwater management. I do have our project engineer, Dave Powell, online, and also our geotech engineer, Adrian Mascoro. They're both online to answer any questions because things can get technical when we're talking about hillside grading. But, you know, we rely on these professionals to actually our engineers and also the professionals you have on your team at the city. And we design very carefully, and we also review these permits very carefully to make sure that they meet all the standards. Of course, there is a list of conditions, and at all times, both our team of professionals and the city will be involved as the project proceeds. We very carefully design Leone Hills, and we respectfully request your approval of the hillside application and your recommendation of approval for Leone Hills subdivision number 2 to City Council. And I can answer questions if you would like. Again, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Suggs. We're going to hold on questions for just a minute. First, we're going to hear from the Neighborhood Association. I assume there's someone online representing the Highlands Neighborhood Association. Could you please raise your hand? Okay. Mr. Highlands Neighborhood. Mr. Klein had his hand up and now it's down. Hold on just a second. Yep. Hang on just 1 minute, please.
Jeff Bradley is the president. We're done.
Mr. Klein, are you representing the Highlands Neighborhood Association this evening?
No, sir. I'm actually in the El Pilar Estates directly across from the proposed planning. Sorry, I was misunderstood there.
No, that is just fine. We can just hang on for 1 minute. We're going to go ahead and field questions from the commission for either staff or the applicant at this time, and then we'll open it up for public comment. So to the commission, are there any questions for staff or the applicant?
Mr. Chair.
Let me go with Mr. Commissioner Gillespie first, please.
Oh, no.
Ladies
You have
first?
to- yeah, definitely.
Okay. Commissioner Moore. I believe that's Commissioner Moore.
Yes. So I guess I just want a little bit more reasoning behind the street frontage of those lots. And I'm assuming that they're kind of tapering over to gain that street frontage. Does that meet the intent of the code when it talks about 30 feet of street frontage, just having access to it, or does it need a driveway or some sort of physical like circulation access? And I guess this is a question more for staff.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it does actually meet the code. These are 30-foot poles that provide access down to the street. And in this circumstance, given the topography, the actual site access to the building pads will be through a shared driveway. But this complies with all the requirements of the subdivision ordinance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So I just want to make sure I understand. And I'm looking at the same slide everyone's looking at. So lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can clearly see the building pads, the flattish area. And so is it my understanding that all 4 of those areas had been previously graded or gently contoured?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I know if you can bring up some of the old aerial photographs, but lot 1, 2, and 3 was definitely previously graded for the house.
Right. No, it took, we can stay on that topo page. It was better.
So you can actually kind of see the underlying slopes.
Yeah, so it's real gentle. So the heavy grading was done 15 years ago.
Around 2002, 2005.
Now, pad 4, is that a house pad on the far south side where it says 4?
That is correct. That's what they're proposing.
And that shows also that it's already been graded, it looks like to me. In fact, that whole road going out to 4 looks like it's been graded to me. Because, the topo's just changed dramatically.
That is correct. There's, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the area out to number 4, there is a road that currently goes out there. So clearly it was graded, and the road, there's a road was constructed out to that 4 building pad area, which is on top of or close to top of the ridge and was naturally relatively flat to begin with.
Yeah, it was always flatter, but it's been widened.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll let others take a crack.
Any other questions from the commission for staff or the applicant? Okay. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing portion of this item. We had a few folks that signed up ahead of time. We're going to start with those folks, and then we will move to those of you that are online and just raise your hand. First was Heath Clark, but it looks like maybe Mr. Clark may have dropped.
Mr. Chair, I'm still here.
Okay, sorry about that there, Mr. Clark. You can
No
go
problem.
ahead and state your name and address for the record, please.
I will, thank you. And David has a brief presentation I think that he could maybe load up for me. So again, Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street. In this case, I'm representing ZWJ Properties, LLC, and its principal, Zeke Johnson. Zeke's here with me. And when we can get this up, I'd like to refer to that picture as we go. So I'd ask for your patience. That's the one. Thank you. So as I start out, I do want to be clear that we are not opposed to development in general, including in this area. My client's development, the Wynn Hollow subdivision, was approved a few years ago immediately to the west of the proposed project. So as you're looking at the grading map that we've all been referring to today, it's immediately above this picture. You can see that there is a steep grade from this project down to my client's development, and it's that proximity to those steep slope areas that we'd like to causes us to want to be on the record about a few issues. And Dave, can I advance slides, or do you guys need to advance them? Thank you. So this picture helps to illustrate our concern. This is the view from the southwest facing the proposed subdivision. When Wynn Hollow was developed, which was after this grading that was done on top of the adjacent hillside, like in other foothills projects, we did slope stability studies at that point. As a result of that, catchment walls were required to address the possibility of unstable slopes. So those catchment walls were installed in the areas that I've indicated here with yellow arrows. In total, there's about $500,000 of catchment wall that's been installed, and they are not insignificant. Those walls are design rated to exceed the loads that a highway barriers can handle. And next slide. We have 2 concerns that we hope can be addressed through this process. The first is with regard to the proximity of the slopes. We're concerned that the defensible space required under the Wildland Urban Interface Code will be along those steep slopes. That means if those areas have to be maintained, that there could be additional erosion. So to avoid that, we're suggesting that the defensible space all be above the edge of slope. Second concern is with regard to water. We understand the plans with regard to stormwater, but we're also concerned about irrigation, overwatering, and keeping all of that away from the edges of the property. That's why you can see in this letter, which we requested an analysis from MTI, they made a recommendation that there be a no water zone established at the top of slopes to prohibit potentially destabilizing effects of water irrigation, runoff, and subsurface discharge. Next slide. Practically, we understand that it could be difficult to enforce that. You can put it in the CC&Rs, but then you're relying on the HOA to prevent a problem that could be pretty horrific if it plays out. So our suggestion would be to move the driveways around, and that would essentially force a reduction in the amount of landscape that could be overwatered and lead to erosion above us. So again, excuse me, we are not opposed to the development, but we are concerned with two things: the use of steep slopes for defensible space, and we're very concerned with the possibility of overwatering and believe that could be a significant potential hazard to our property. And so with that, I'd leave and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. We're going to move right along to the next person that signed up, Deborah Steer. And Deborah, if you could please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Deborah Steyer. I'm at 4163 North La Fontana Way, up in the El Pilar Upper Neighborhood Association. As we do not have a homeowners association at this time in our neighborhood, I felt it was prudent that we had somebody speak for our neighbors. Our concern is not in the development in itself. We are not opposed to, or at least I am not opposed to having the development there. Ours is line of sight. Earlier, they addressed that and stated that our view is only to the south, which is inaccurate. Our view in the upper neighborhood is also to the west. And our concern is that these 4 homes would degrade the value of our homes when that view is blocked. We would suggest that there be stated somewhere that the tree height in these neighborhoods be restricted to no greater than 20 feet tall, so that we can maintain our property value in the upper El Pilar neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Steyer. And that's all the folks that signed up ahead of time this evening. For those of you that are online, if you could please raise your hand if you're interested in testifying on this item, and then we'll just run down the list. So right now I have Mr. Dylan Klein. Mr.
Yes,
Klein,
sir.
you can go ahead and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure thing. Dylan Klein, 3571 Sonata Way, Boise, Idaho, 83702. Thanks for hearing my comments, committee and board members. The first thing I'd like to bring up is the adverse impact to habitat, as noted by Deputy Fire Chief Jerry McAdams in his letter to David Moser. The proposed sub it's located in a wildlife urban interface zone. There are currently 2 red-tailed hawks nests up there, 2 red fox dens, western screech owl, and a great horned owl, among osprey and several other species that have been living on that hillside in the 15 years that I've owned the property directly across from it, which also is part of my view and the aesthetic and the value of the home, which I agree with the previous statement from the gal in the neighborhood stating that our views are not only to the south, but to the west, which this development will greatly impact. We've got another issue is preservation of outstanding or unique features, which that hillside there is definitely a foothills ridge, which also is a part, I will note, of the foothills ridge to river system. So a lot of bisecting and connecting trails go through there, which would be definitely disrupted with this development. Also, having those homes, it would really destroy the aesthetic value as well as home values, recreation, public access, beautification, privacy. They'd all be looking down basically into the neighborhood's windows, view, destroy natural habitats with the potential of traffic signs, right in front of the fire station here that would disrupt our view. The erosion is the really bad thing though. I don't see any way of getting a fire truck up that into the neighborhood or back down for that matter. The soil stability on that road is horrendous. I know Mike Homan, the guy that developed the place. He abandoned the project because it was so silty and sandy. So the value, in addition to our homes being devalued and public trails being cut off and natural habitats and ecosystems being destroyed, which I don't think have been looked into or addressed, the soil erosion is incredibly horrible. And I believe on both sides of the hill, I don't think that you can have defensible area built out enough without destroying natural habitats and creating more problems. So I think that road that they're proposing to widen going up would have the potential to not only cave in on the residents below, but into the fire station as well. And like I said, I've been here 15 years, and I watched Mike Homan develop the place, and I talked to him quite a bit about it. And he abandoned that project because of those problems. It's pretty much impossible, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I should mention too that I sit on the transportation committee, so I'm.
Your time is up. I apologize.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, is there anybody else online this evening that would like to speak on this item? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a hand up. Stephen Holmes. Mr. Holmes, if you could state your name and address for the record, you have 3 minutes. Looks like you might be muted.
Is this better?
Yes, we can hear you.
Stephen Holmes, 3610 North Sonata Way in the El Pilar neighborhood. I'd like to reinforce the views for the two other people that were talking about property values and habitat and ecological impact. I'm also concerned about work hours. If this actually does go through, will work hours be stipulated, say 8 to 5, or are people going to be starting to work at 5 o'clock in the morning, moving large equipment, that sort of thing? And back to aesthetics, I heard they're going to put in a reinforced concrete wall on that road to reinforce the soils from sloping off that Dylan talked about. I think it's important that if that is built, that it needs to be colored and textured to match existing so that we have the best possible view of what I deem an unattractive concrete wall. So work hours, aesthetics, and habitat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Is there anybody else online this evening that would like to testify on this item? Okay, seeing no hands raised, we will return back to the applicant for rebuttal. Ms. Suggs and your team, maybe 5 minutes, I think would be appropriate, but if you need more time, we could probably add a few minutes if you need.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. I appreciate the time to address some of these issues from the neighbors. I'll start at Mr. Holmes' concerns, and Dave Moser has a couple of things online on his PowerPoint deck. Probably we should bring up a couple of the photographs that we have of examples of walls. There we go. The one on the left, if you can see, there is some texture and it is a bit colored, and there's texture to the wall, so it doesn't look like a concrete wall. The only one about the problem with that photograph is it shows the slope, kind of bare slope above. And that's why I came up with this photograph too, an example, because at the top of the slope, we'll actually be pushing the shotcrete back into the slope. This is shotcrete that's on top of a soil nail wall. And that's a little different from maybe some of the shotcrete walls you've seen around town that look like that they're just sprayed onto the soil itself. So rest assured that our geotechnical engineer has taken a look at this and has specified a soil nail wall that's then covered with textured and dyed shotcrete. I'm going to have to defer to Dave about work hours. I believe they're 7 a.m. to probably 7 p.m. or something like that. We certainly don't, especially in these hot summer days, don't wait until 8 o'clock, and we don't stop at 5 when we're under construction. However, the engineer has spent a lot of time trying to balance the cut and fill on the property. So the larger trucks that would be moving stuff wouldn't be coming up and down the driveway. So we're trying really hard to keep the soil that's up on the top of the hill, on top of the hill. Want to address the the concerns about the WUI and the habitat. I think Mr. Klein had thought that that was a wildlife urban interface. It's really the wildland urban interface that has to do with fire protection. And we are, of course, going to meet all the requirements for that. I'm not aware of any trails on the property that crisscross the property. It's pretty steep to go up on either side of the property. I do see sometimes where there's some kids up there on that lot number 4. There's a concrete pad there and people like to sit up there and drink beer. So I've been up there a couple of times myself, not drinking beer, just to see. We can get a fire truck up there. We do have worked with both Mr. Johnson before he left and now with Jerry too, to make sure that we can meet all the fire department requirements. Let's see. I'm glad to know that the folks over in El Pilar are not adverse to development, since they live in a foothills development as well. But I don't believe that there are any really view easements, as I mentioned before, that would maintain some sort of view for them. And I think the trees in El Pilar probably are a lot more. It's a really well-established subdivision and has some large trees, which I think makes it, the foothills development, sort of more conducive to the neighborhood. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the Mr. Clark's and Mr. Johnson's request to redesign the project. I do have the two experts on tap, sort of. So if they would like to maybe weigh in on this idea. Dave, if you could put our grading plan back up, just so that they would have something to talk about. It helps to see, and yeah, and even that one, that either one that shows those lots and how they were, as Mr. Gillespie said, already sort of. I'll let Dave Powell and Adrian chat with you about some of these issues with catchments and water.
So this is Dave Powell. Can people hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, Dave Powell, 2447 South Vista Avenue, Boise, Idaho. I'm the project engineer for this particular project. And just wanted to say that this project has on the upper portion of the project, the upper road that follows lot 1 and lot 2, that's an existing roadway. It's in excellent condition. All of the utilities to lots 1 and 2 are already installed along that alignment. So to think of wasting that roadway, going over to the west side, totally regrading that to accept a new roadway is just does not make sense for the project. And I can appreciate the concerns of Mr. Johnson and his home site that he has down below, but I think we have enough checks and balances in this project with our geotechnical evaluations, our grading evaluations, and city public works evaluations and constraints are going to be put on this project that we can provide for proper grading and drainage to protect the slopes below to the west. A visual inspection of this area, either through Google Earth or aerial photos, shows that at least to date, there's been no sloughing of these soils, no loss of vegetation, no erosion of these slopes that would put that property down at the bottom of the slope at jeopardy. That's another reason why we're taking this gentle slope that goes from lot 1 down toward lot 3 and providing pads. We're providing pads so that you know where the home footprint is going to go. I believe the developer, Mr. Jao, is committed to single-story lots on lots 2, 3, and 4. Lot 1 is the only lot that he is not committing to a single story on. We have recommendation in our geotech report that says roof drain systems should be installed. So we have a design system for roof drains to pick up all hard surfaces and all yard surfaces if need be, so that you have a net increase. you have a net decrease in stormwater to these upper lot areas and to the slopes to the west than what you have up there today. So once this project goes through this process, and if we are able to get approval of preliminary plat, we are going to go through another level of design to prepare final design reports. So there's another level of scrutiny that is going to be evaluated on our part and the city's part to make sure that this project is viable for this upper slope area. And I think that's probably all I need. Oh, one more thing. The WUI limits on this right now imposed by the fire department are those lands and those boundaries that we can control. So that westerly property line and establishing that as our 30-foot WUI limit is critical to this project. Moving that WUI to the top of those ridges, and if you can imagine, 30-foot inset from that point, and then on the easterly side, 30 foot from that point, you don't have a building pad for any one of these 4 lots. So that is an absolute condition that we cannot have for this subdivision. And with the fire department's requirement of that WUI, the primary reason for that 30-foot defensible space is for access. Yes, you have to.
I'm sorry, your time is up, and we actually gave you a few extra minutes there. So.
Okay, that's good. I think I've covered it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and send these items back to the commission. And what is the commission's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
I move that we approve CFH 20-35 and recommend approval to the City Council of SDB 20-17 with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion for approval from Commissioner Gillespie and a second from Commissioner Squires.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So just a couple of things that are really forefront of my mind. One, these pads are, for all intents and purposes, already there. And they've been there for quite some time. And so unlike a lot of foothills development, we actually know that at least the grading that's been done hasn't caused, as the engineer said, sloughing or erosion, or we haven't had a big issue. I looked at the pictures of the road. I'm not a road engineer, but it didn't look like the road had either slid out either. So it looks like the road bed is solid enough that it's there to be built on. And in this particular case, given that, I trust that the city engineers and the applicant's engineers are going to be able to build a stable subdivision. I'd also just point out briefly, this is 9.28 acres. With respect to wildlife and sort of open space, it preserves the vast majority of that space, isn't developed or isn't really affected at all. So all in all, unlike a lot of foothills development we see, this one I think is going to have pretty minimal impact going forward because of what's already been done. So for that reason, I support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Excuse me. Thank you, Commissioner Gillespie. Any other discussion from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Squires.
I'll just say this is a really big blast from the past for me. I was the original planner on the Oni Hills back as a young Boise city planner in 2000, I think, 1999, somewhere in there. As someone who has reviewed hillside projects, I know firsthand how detailed the reviews are by the professional staff. And I will just echo what Commissioner Gillespie said, and I will be supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Squires. Any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
I also want to add on to kind of the discussion about the unstable soils and things like that, and just note there's a pretty extensive list of kind of conditions that must be met during construction. Public Works recommended condition of approvals, including if they find any soils or encounter any soils that are not what they expected or that alter anything during construction, that too is required to be reported to the city and worked out as well. So there's that additional in terms of the soil stability concerns. If it is encountered during there, they will be required to work through it as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Any other comments from the commission? Okay, I'll just chime in real quick. I'm also in support of this motion. I agree with Commissioner Gillespie's summary of the project. I think it works in the project's favor that the initial grading was done in excess of 15 years ago, and that there are no apparent issues, major issues with that grading. I also second the comments that we're at a point now with these hillside developments that there are a series of checks and rechecks and rechecks. And as the applicant pointed out, there will be an additional series of checks once they get to the construction of each of these individual lots. So I feel comfortable that what's being proposed is being fully vetted and that it will be a successful and safe project. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and call the vote, please.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Ratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you all for that. And we're going to go ahead and take just a quick 5-minute break. So if everybody can be back to their computers at, let's call it 7:23, we will reconvene at that time. Thanks.
Okay, we're,
Yes, I'm here.
hey,
Hey,
what's up?
Hey, Leon.
hi guys. I mean, Chair and Commissioners, my apologies.
Is that a new shirt?
Just for you guys, yes.
Hey, we're still off the record until the chairman calls us back into session.
Well, it looks like Mr. Letson ironed a shirt for us this evening. So
My steady string of band t-shirts isn't going to cut it at the commission, I don't think, so. Had to
I
wear
think you
something on the
loan
butt.
some of your rock band t-shirts to Commissioner Jim because he can pair them with his guitar collection.
I've been most impressed by Commissioner
Yes.
Bratton's backdrop. He's definitely got it going on, so.
he does indeed. All right. Well, let's get our last item this evening rolling, and that's item number 5, PUD 20-18. I'm sorry. I think before we get too much further, it looks like I think everybody's back. Jim's back. Janelle. I don't see Janelle.
Janelle, are you back? Janelle and Chris.
Janelle and Chris. Holding. We're going to hold for one more minute until we have all of our commissioners.
Sorry, I'm here. Janelle.
Janelle is back. Chris, are you back?
While we wait for Chris, we should, Commissioner Bratnober, we're hoping that Leon can loan you some of his rock band t-shirts to go with your really cool backdrop.
Hey, that's great, but I have some 20 or 30-year-old rock t-shirts already. Maybe I'll wear one to an upcoming meeting.
That would be a highlight.
I like it.
All right. We got Mr. Blanchard is back. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with our last item this evening, PUD 20-18 and SUB 20-15 at 3622 West Sunset Avenue. Conditional use permit and preliminary plat for a 2 buildable lot subdivision on 0.31 acres in an R1C zone. Mr. Letson, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, let me see that. Can everyone see my PowerPoint there?
Yes, we can. Sorry, we can.
Okay. All right, great. The items before you are a 2-lot PUD and subdivision located at 3622 West Sunset Avenue in an R1C zone. The subject property is a 0.3 acre parcel located on the north side of Sunset Avenue between 36th Street and Woody Drive. Surrounding uses include single-family homes on lots ranging from 1/8 to 1/3 of an acre in size. Howard Taft Elementary is approximately 500 feet to the southwest, and the intersection of Veterans Memorial Parkway and State Street is less than 1/4 of a mile to the south. The PUD consists of 2 lots that are approximately 6,000 and 7,300 square feet each. The only dimensional standard the applicant is utilizing the PUD for involves a reduction to the minimum lot width of 50 feet typically required in the R1C zone. The lot pictured here on the west side of the development will be approximately 43 feet wide. Both homes will be served by individual driveways, and parking will be located behind the homes. Other than the removal of 1 silver maple at the center of the new lot on the west, all existing trees on site will be retained, and additional trees will be planted throughout the development as well. As previously mentioned, the project includes a 2-lot subdivision. Included in this request is a waiver to the requirements to install curb, gutter, and sidewalks. Although the planning team is supportive of the request to waive curb and gutter, we believe sidewalks should be installed. Pictured here is an overview of the neighborhood. Currently, sidewalks exist on the south side of Sunset Avenue. So this area here, we have attached sidewalks. and approximately 130 feet to the east on the north side of Sunset Avenue near the intersection with 36th Street. All reviewing agencies and departments approve the project with standard conditions. ACHD does support waiving curb and gutter for drainage and other typical reasons that they waive curb and gutter on projects like this. It should be noted that included in late correspondence, there was a letter from the neighbor to the east who encouraged waiving sidewalk as well, and I hope the commission had a chance to read that letter, but largely some of their major concerns were signs typically used by ACHD to show the end of a sidewalk. And if you've driven around our city, you've probably seen these. They're kind of large red and white signs indicating that no sidewalk continues beyond this point. So from a visual standpoint, they were concerned. And if they're on the call tonight, they can give you additional reasons as well, but they were also stated in that letter. So in conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of the PUD and waiver of the subdivision ordinance requirement for curb and gutter, as well as the 2-lot subdivision. The motions needed are a final decision on the plan unit development and a recommendation to council on the subdivision. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leon. Okay, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant. Mr. Smith, if you could start with your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Matt Smith, 3622 West Sunset. I'm here with my wife, Sam Smith. And can everybody hear us?
We can, yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so thank you guys for sticking around for so late and reviewing this for us. I just wanted to mention a couple things. Like we do have a waiver, and we decided to do the waiver. It took a little while before we actually came to this conclusion, but I was talking to Ethan and I thought that it was actually fine with the sidewalk and curb and gutter, if not all of it, until I started talking to ACHD and I realized Ethan had asked me if they were planning on having in their 5-year, and so I went ahead and asked that, and then ACHD mentioned that they I think it was Stacy Yarrington, the ACHD. She mentions it's not in the 5 or 10-year plan for ACHD. In fact, it's not in the plan at all to put a sidewalk. And I didn't know this, but apparently, like, the city wouldn't ask for the sidewalk unless there was a subdivision going in. This is Ethan mentioning that to me. And the 2 houses to the east of us they're developed, and the lots are developed, and they were just purchased recently by 2 young couples. And they would have to actually get rid of that house and then divide those lots out to be required to have sidewalk out in the front. And my fear is that I would spend $8,000. I actually don't know how much the sidewalk would cost. Maybe it's more than that, but I imagine it's something like that to cover the 95 feet. And it would be an island sidewalk for 20 years until ACHD decided that they wanted to redo the road, and then they would rebuild it or take it out. And I kind of feel like this is Ethan's own words in the description, that's extremely unlikely infill development or redevelopment will happen because it's a well-maintained and valuable mid-century home, and lots are basically, I have the largest lot, and we're planning on moving over into the new house from the existing one. And so I just don't see it as something that that would happen. And I think there was also just recently a house built right around the corner from us, and they weren't really required to build any. So actually weren't required at all to build sidewalk, curb, or gutter. And then I think it is pretty kind of a valid point with the sign barrier. So if this thing sits there for 20 years and there's a sign barrier at the end of the lot and nobody's really using it, then I just kind of like, I kind of questioned the validity or like the reason for having that there. And I understand if we're going to connect that and there's really a chance to connect it, then let's do it. But if we're going to spend 8,000 and every morning I have to go out and look at a sidewalk that's never connected, it would be unfortunate. So I think that's, was there anything else you wanted to say? Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for listening to us. I think my biggest concern was just to kind of echo what Matt said, and that's the fact that the sidewalk won't be continued. And so we fully support sidewalks in Boise. We think they're extremely important for pedestrians and for parking. And but that's the main concern, is that we would just have sort of this island with signs at the ends, and the chances of there being a continued sidewalk seems pretty limited right now. But we are, fully open to putting in a sidewalk if you guys think that's what's best. We just wanted to voice these concerns and see what you think.
Thanks. I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll see. I don't know if we have someone from the Neighborhood Association online. It's the Veterans Park Neighborhood Association. If they're online, could you please raise your hand? Okay, no takers. So with that, we will go ahead. There's really nothing to rebut by the applicant. So with that, we'll just go ahead and throw it back to the commission for any questions to either staff or the applicant.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Squires?
I have a question for staff. So Leon, talk to me about, I'm having the same issue that the applicant's having with the sidewalk. I'm always a huge advocate for pedestrian connectivity, but this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me right now, especially because it's not in ECHG's 5 or 10-year work plan. Is there other parcels that are getting ready to redevelop that we may need to know about, or other opportunities to connect that sidewalk sooner than later that should be considered as part of this?
Yeah, Chair, Commissioner Squires, not to my knowledge, there's no redevelopment in the area that would really connect this property to existing sidewalks in the area. It's more of a principle that we try to get sidewalks wherever we can, certainly at the discretion of the commission to decide if that's appropriate here or not. I mean, I think that there have been good arguments made on both sides, but back to your point, yeah, no adjacent parcels redeveloping that staff is aware of. So,
thank you.
Leon, or Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Gillespie?
Leon, are there any physical aspects of this development that would make putting in a sidewalk any more difficult than it is anywhere else in the city under similar development circumstances?
Chairman, Commissioner Gillespie, no, I don't believe so. I think we're able to retain all of the existing trees on site and be able to accommodate for new trees. It's simply, I think, to the point that there's not going to be a connection on either side for a while, that it seems to be the biggest concern. But no, nothing that would prohibit the sidewalk. The curb and gutter were problematic for ACHD, as noted in their review, that it would runs the potential to create some drainage issues. But yeah, no constraints on the site that would prohibit or limit our ability to have a sidewalk.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Bratnober?
Hi, yeah, a couple of questions for you, Leon. So you mentioned that ACHD had waived curb and gutter. Did they also waive sidewalk?
Commissioner Bratnober, they were supportive of the waiver of curb and gutter, and I can go back and look at the review for you real quick to answer that question more thoroughly. But per ACHD's review, they basically say if the city is going to require sidewalk, have them coordinate with our agency to make sure that it's designed properly and located in the right place. But they oftentimes remain neutral here. As the applicant has mentioned, there is no plan to build out Sunset Avenue in this area in the next 5 to 10 years with a more cohesive, street rebuild that we've seen in other parts of the city, typically on like arterials and collectors. So from that standpoint, I think, again, ACHD seems to be neutral about sidewalk here. If the city wants it, they'll help us figure out what it should look like.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Bratnober.
So yeah, I'm trying to relate this to situations where we've dealt with, other island or proposals for island sidewalks. And in many of those cases, we've said, no, that doesn't seem to make sense. And so I'm trying to divine what the difference here, because quite frankly, the analysis makes a compelling argument to not have it. It lists about 5 points that actually the applicant has listed those in his testimony previously, and it seems to be referencing comprehensive plan goals that don't directly talk about sidewalks. So can you help me to find a difference in this versus other areas where we've actually said, no, we shouldn't put in an island sidewalk?
Yeah, Commissioner Brattenber, I think again, it seems to be more of a principal move that sidewalks are a good play here to promote connectivity. It is a redeveloping neighborhood. There's a park in close proximity, a school in close well, not a park, there's a school in close proximity. So generally we like to see improved pedestrian facilities in situations like that. But it is, I would say that it's largely a high level push to get these sidewalks, not so much like this is an important corridor for the city right here that we need to have this sidewalk. It's really just kind of a principal move that, if there's room to do it, let's do it. And we'll see what happens to those adjacent parcels and see if we can get something connected. But yeah, we've still, as I mentioned earlier, there's about 130-foot gap that'll be between the edge of that sidewalk and then heading east to the existing sidewalk at the corner of 36th and Sunset. How long that takes to fill in, that's really a matter of redevelopment occurring. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Gillespie.
I have a question for Commissioner Brattenber. Commissioner, I'm struggling to recall when we did not require at least a sidewalk. I know we had a very active discussion several months ago about a parcel where there was 100 feet adjacent, and then there was another 100 feet on top of it, and there was irrigation in the way. We had a long discussion. I think we did end up requiring a sidewalk. So I'm struggling, and I would like to be reminded of when we have waived the whole shooting match sidewalk, curb, and gutter.
I can check that out and find some of those, Milt. I know there was at least one, but it was a while back.
Thank you. Any other questions?
In my tenure, which has not been incredibly long.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I'd just like to confirm, so we would, signage at each end of the sidewalk would be required, blocking, kind of in the middle of the sidewalk, like barrack style, or just a sign that would be required?
Yeah, Chairman, Commissioner Moore, I did reach out to Stacy Yarrington actually of ACHD and asked her specifically, is that something that is required? She said, yes, we do require that for sidewalks that don't continue. She said the only exception being is if there's a gentle enough grade to the adjacent properties that they could easily just end the sidewalk without it creating, some kind of hazard for pedestrians using that sidewalk there. But she said that is their default move, is to put those signs at the end of incomplete sidewalks like this.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Didn't we just approved one of these a couple months ago on Anna Street up on the bench?
I believe we did have one on the bench recently. I'd caution us, though, to get into specifics with past applications.
Chairman, I will note it's always at the discretion of the commission to look at each specific site and determine if it's appropriate. Certainly consistency and precedent are important for any guiding body of the city, but I think looking at a case-by-case situation is probably a good way to go for this one. So,
appreciate the insight there, Leon. I do have one other question for you, off topic, and mostly a more of a procedural question, I think, than anything. There's obviously a large silver maple that they're going to take down to make room for the new house. And I note that they did work with Boise City Forestry to locate, I think, 2 trees on the property to sort of replace that silver maple. Is there no requirement for a true tree mitigation plan for a project of this nature? And that's, again, a little more procedural than anything, I think.
Yeah, Chairman. So yes, typically, our ordinance does state a caliper to caliper exchange rate, if you will. However, I am happy to review Park's comments a little bit more on this if there are specifics to that regard. But I do know that the tree that they're looking to remove is of a certain type in the city that is often deemed problematic, and that our Parks Department is actively seeking ways to reduce the amount of silver maples that are occurring, since they were all planted 100 years ago and unfortunately seem to fall down on houses a lot in this neighborhood. So I don't think we're getting caliper for caliper here, but I think we're also getting a new class 1, a new class 2, and kind of the removal of a tree that's problematic for the city, or type of tree anyway.
Thank you, Leon. Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore?
I have one more question on the sidewalk for staff. So one of the points in the project report or the staff report was that sidewalks also help delineate parking for that length of roadway. Can you tell us how many parking spaces based on the driveways and things like that would need to be avoided would we be delineating, I guess, setting out with that?
Yes, Chairman, Commissioner Moore, typically a parallel space is 22 feet wide, or long, I guess, if I'm speaking about that dimension appropriately. I'm seeing we have about 95 feet of frontage here, if I'm doing my math properly, and it looks like we will have, at a minimum, 2 10 to 12 foot driveways. So just from that alone, we can pull that number out and we would still have, roughly 1.5 to 2 spaces in front of the lot to the east, and we'd have room for about 1 space on the lot to the west in terms of on-street parking, if I'm answering your question properly.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, last call. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, great. Thanks to both staff and the applicant. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing portion of the item. We have one person online. Ms. Ballard, I assume you are waiting to testify on this item. If that's the case, please go ahead and just raise your hand. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I have somebody signed up? I apologize. I had, let's take a quick step back. I have a Jeffrey Oliver down here to testify. No takers. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and move to Ms. Ballard. Ms. Ballard, are you here to testify this evening on this item?
This is actually Annie Mosier at 2525 North Woody Drive. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I assume you're here to testify.
Not really. We hadn't heard the specifics of it, so we were just here just to understand what they were doing. And we really like what they're doing. This infill project looks really great. So fully support it and totally understand the neighbors on any sign issue that they're looking at. But I do struggle with trying to put sidewalks in after living here 23 years and watching the kids going back and forth to school. They do walk across the street too to use that sidewalk. They also walk on the north side of the street, and there's a lot of space there for them to walk. So just a comment on that. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, there's really not much to rebuttal, but I'll go ahead and give the applicant a chance, a few minutes to rebuttal if you'd like.
Say something?
I don't
You have
think
something?
Let's just talk. Well, I don't think we really have much else to add. Thank you for considering both sides. I think on one hand, we definitely understand the principle of trying to put sidewalks in whenever available because of, it really is important in making a city friendly to pedestrians and also just aesthetically pleasing. And yeah, I think that the concern just still stands that because of we know our neighbors to the west and east quite well, and we don't see any redevelopment happening in the near future, and so I think the signs, visually speaking, are kind of probably our biggest. Yeah. Our biggest concern is just that,
Sure.
but also, we understand why you'd want to put in a sidewalk as well, and it is better for overall, in the long run. So it's a tough decision.
Thanks. Oh, you done?
Yep, I'm
Sorry.
done. That's
I
it.
need to actually stop her. Okay.
All right, well, thank you both for that. We'll go ahead and return the item back to the commission for a motion and discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Bratnober.
I move, oh, hang on, I lost it on my screen. I move we approve PUD 20-18 and recommend SUB 20-15 for approval to the City Council based on the terms and conditions in the staff report, with the exception of requiring a sidewalk.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Gillespie and a second. Sorry, Commissioner Bratnober, and a second from Commissioner Squires for approval. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So I will be opposing the motion for the simple reason that there's no good reason not to put in a sidewalk. I would invite the commissioners to look at the overhead shot, the Google Earth, and you will see between North Arthur and 36, Burke, Bush, Woody, 38th, Pine, Stacy, Bush, Bellamy, all those houses have been built in the last 100 years. And almost all of them were built without sidewalks because previous commissions and councils went through the exact same calculus that we just went through. So if we don't require sidewalks where we can, they will never be there. This is not a 20-year problem. This is a 100, 150-year problem. You're looking at this neighborhood. There's no good reason not to put in this sidewalk. It's not unusually expensive. It's not hard to put in. We've heard testimony that if they put a little bit of gravel curbing or smoothing at the edges, they don't even need to have a sign from ACHD. And frankly, if it doesn't connect anything for 20 years, I'm fine with that. The things we do now last 100 years. Look at this slide. Look at this page of the development where there's sidewalks and where there's not. So I just think it's undisputed by the city, this commission, and the council that sidewalks are an unambiguously good thing. So I'm never going to support not putting them in on flat, dry ground where they fit for a couple $1,000. That just makes no sense to me in the long run for our city. So that's where I'm at.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Finfrock?
Yeah, I'm not going to be supporting the motion as well. I think the bigger picture here is the goal of the pedestrian connectivity. And as development continues and the parcels are updated, I think eventually we'll see a continuous pattern of improvement to the pedestrian connectivity, regardless of whether it's through development or ACHD projects. But I'm with Commissioner Gillespie on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Finfrock. Any other discussion, comments?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
I will be supporting the motion. I don't see anything to be gained by putting in 90 feet of sidewalk in a neighborhood that has sidewalks across the street. You know, I live here on the bench and it's exactly the same way on my side of the street. There's absolutely no curb and gutter and sidewalk on one side. The other side's all improved. There's nothing to be gained here by making this homeowner spend that money. And I think this is exactly the kind of infill project that we're looking for in these kind of neighborhoods. And so I'm supportive of it.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sound off real quick on this too. I'm definitely in support of the project. I see no issues with the split or the additional house. It looks like to me that the land where the new house is going to be going is quite underutilized. So I think it's a good infill opportunity. Obviously, you know, the sidewalk is a big item in question. And I'm going to side with Commissioner Gillespie on this one as well. If only for the fact that for consistency and precedent that we continue to include sidewalks in our requirements. I just think it's a slippery slope if we start to really deviate from consistent direction for all future applications. So with that, I think I'm actually opposed to the motion as well. But again, I just want to be very clear that I'm supportive of the project as a whole. So unless there's any other comments or discussion from the commission, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Chair. I totally agree. Especially knowing, you know, the concerns with the sign. If we can actually grade it to the point where it can be used in conjunction with the gravel frontage, I think that, you know, a lot of the signage issues are kind of remediated in that respect. And I totally agree. But otherwise, absolutely support the project as a whole. It's a great infill development. But I think, you know, if you can remediate the sign issue, then it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bratnober.
Mr. Chair, yes. So just some procedural stuff. Well, first of all, there is some precedent. SOS 20-3 was one case where we did something similar back in May. But I want to caution, you know, I made my motion with respect to, you know, and added the rejection of the recommendation. One of the things I just want to say here is if for whatever reason that motion is voted down, a question, do we then have to have another motion to approve the project? In other words, I think it sounds like everybody here wants to see this development go forward. We're just at odds about the sidewalk. And so I want to make sure from a procedural perspective, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here.
Well, probably the cleanest thing we could do is to go ahead and take the vote, see if we have a pass or fail. And then if it fails, I think we can reevaluate.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Staff. Okay. So unless there's any other comment, we'll go ahead and call the vote right now and we'll see where things lie. Okay.
Schaefer,
No.
Squires,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Moore,
Nay.
Gillespie,
No.
Finfrock,
Nay.
Bratnober,
Aye.
Three in favor, 4 opposed. Motion fails.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
I move we approve PUD 20-18 and recommend approval to the City Council of SUB 20-15 with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Motion by Commissioner Gillespie, second by Commissioner Finfrock. Any additional conversation or discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Squires,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you to the applicant and staff. With that, that takes care of all of our new business this evening. If everyone can hang on for 1 minute, I believe we have a announcement from staff.
Yes, commissioners, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that Leon Lutzen will be transitioning to our Grow Our Housing manager, I believe is the official title, here in a couple weeks. So we will get the pleasure to see his face virtually or physically, I'm not sure, one more time on August 3rd, and then we likely won't see him again. So best wishes, Leon.
Congratulations, Leon.
Thank you. Thanks.
Housing.
What? 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 Say that one more time.
So he'll be the grower housing manager in the Housing and Community Development division within PDS. So he'll just be like virtually.
So Leon, what does that mean? Like, what is that job?
It's focused on city housing projects that are initiated or supported by the city is one aspect of it, but also pretty much anything housing focused that the city wants to be involved with, I'll be a part of that discussion. So you may see me as potentially an applicant representing a project in the future, or someone submitting a recommendation. We're still nailing all that down, but it's just housing focused for me moving forward. So
awesome. Congratulations. Good luck.
Yes, congratulations, Leon. And if we do get to see you at the first meeting in August, I think you've been given your directive to wear a band T-shirt for your
or send one to Jim. Jim, you have to wear one too.
If Leon wears one, I've got to wear one.
I'll dig out an old Boston T-shirt or something.
Yeah.
I love Boston. Guitar thing coming at you. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.